We're just about ready to get started. This is JavaScript Minnesota, the meetup which hopefully we're planning to attend tonight, and if not, welcome.
My name is Anna. Welcome. Just a couple logistical things. If you don't have the Wi-Fi, we have that
Almost
on the back of our slideshow.
It is
my apologies.
not there.
It is not there.
It is here.
There it is.
In the Google Doc.
So Olsen and the password is guest with lowercase g. Restrooms are in the back where you came in across the hall. If you haven't found those, there's obviously food and drink in the back. Feel free to help yourself if you haven't already and continue to consume until it's all gone. We are on Slack and we are live streaming this on YouTube, so the links for that are up there. We're also on Twitter. And any other logistics?
One other thing I'll mention is if you're not already in the Slack, you can actually get an invite by going to javascriptmn.com. So if you're if you've thought about joining the Slack, haven't joined the Slack yet, that is the spot to do it. Then past that, we'll go through a quick thank you to all of our current sponsors for 2017 here. Of course, our host is ICF Olsen. Do we have Sean from Olsen here tonight? Anyone else from Olsen who wants to say words?
Would you like to say something about Olsen? No pressure.
What do you want me to say?
The elevator speech.
Yeah, the elevator speech, or we got it too. We've got one that we can give if
We're open. And this time we really focus on our loyalties here on the platform. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
And your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Christina. I work in our recruiting team here. Want to know more about Olsen? Certainly, stop by and I'll chat. I don't want to bore you. My elevator speech is rambling.
No worries, it's much appreciated. So Olsen's been our host for over a year now, and we are extremely appreciative of their support. Next up is a longtime sponsor for us, Twilio, who provide telecommunications APIs, including the ability to send text messages with and without pictures, phone calls, and now fax as well. Via web services. Well, not web services in the gross sense, web services in the good sense. If you've ever used a Twilio service, you know why I said that, because prototyping with Twilio is so simple and so developer focused and so developer friendly. They put a lot of effort into that, so if you need to do that sort of thing, Twilio can help you out. I believe we do have somebody from Twilio here, but I don't want to have them do an elevator pitch unless they want to and they're not walking up, so I'm going to call that my elevator pitch. Another of our valued sponsors is Track.js. Track.js provides JavaScript error monitoring and tracking services. If you've ever had to write JavaScript that goes live on other people's websites, not just your own, you know that there's a ton of stuff that can go wrong, and Track.js can help you track that down. Simultaneously, even if you're writing JavaScript that is only on things you control, a lot of things can go wrong. Undefined is not an object, am I right? Track.js can help you find those errors and sort them out. And Track.js is a local company that's really invested in this community, and we thank them again for their support. Another local company that you might have seen recently, they're running a promotion right now, which I'll tell you about in 33 and a third seconds at most, is Front-End Masters. They provide online training with a focus on front-end technologies like JavaScript and CSS and HTML. If you haven't heard of Front-End Masters, now's a great time to check them out because they have some free trainings that you don't have to pay for. If you go to frontendmasters.com, you can take a look. Huh?
Kyle Simpson.
Kyle Simpson, yeah.
Everything he ever did, apparently.
Yeah, everything he's ever done with Front-End Masters, Kyle Simpson's tutorials are all free this week. It's like Kyle Simpson Week, which is pretty cool. So check them out as well. We appreciate their support. Additionally, we'd like to thank our gold sponsors, which include C.H. Robinson, provider of Worldwide Logistics. A bunch of CHR folks are here this evening. And we have some other sponsorships that are currently pending, which we're excited to tell you about the next time when they are no longer pending. Super excited to welcome Ian Coldwater to present This evening, Ian is a DevOps engineer at Jamf Software down the road. I think we might have some folks from Jamf in the house. If you don't know what Jamf Software does, they're really awesome and they're local and they're super cool. They do Mac software administration, I believe. That's probably a vast oversimplification for anyone who's ever done like device administration. It's a lot of stuff, and Ian and team make that happen by being awesome. And in addition to that, you might know Ian from their work with Minneapolis Junior Devs, at a bunch of other, I've seen Ian at tons of meetups in town. And not only that, but Ian's super interested in security and web technologies and has depth of experience in both of them. So I'm super excited to welcome him to the stage tonight. Ian.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So, as Brandon said, during the day, I work as a DevOps engineer for Jamf. During my free time, I spend a lot of time traveling around the country doing capture the flag competitions, which is like a competitive hacking thing. This stuff is fun for me, and it's something that I'm really excited about. And it's something that I'm really excited to share about, because as I've been working as a dev, I've discovered that a lot of this stuff isn't really super common knowledge. And it's knowledge that I think we all should have, because it's important for us to make our code the best it can be and to keep our users as safe as we can keep them. So today I'm going to be speaking about Defense Against the Dark Arts, version cross-site scripting. And I'm going to be talking about how cross-site scripting attacks happen and what you can do to prevent them in your code. So that's me on Twitter, for whatever that's worth. And OK. So cross-site scripting, which is called XSS because CSS was taken, is one of the most commonly found web security vulnerabilities. According to the Open Web Application Security Project, it's found in approximately 2/3 of all applications. It's everywhere. It's really common. It's also one of the most dangerous web security vulnerabilities. You can do a lot with cross-site scripting. Well, apparently that one is over here. So let me just talk about some things that we can do, and then we'll see that slide wherever I put it. And so things that can happen with cross-site scripting. Social engineering or phishing scams, serving malware, remote code execution, keylogging, redirecting users to a malicious site, session hijacking, pretty much anything you can do with a browser. And in some cases, things that you can do with a browser plus some. How does cross-site scripting work? Cross-site scripting is a code injection attack that allows an attacker to execute malicious JavaScript in another user's browser. The attacker does not directly target her victim. She's attacking the website itself. So she's exploiting a vulnerability in a website that the victim is visiting in order to get the website to deliver that code for her. And as far as the dumb pipe that is the browser is concerned, it is just code coming from the website itself. So it's not violating same origin policies or anything like that. As according to the browser, it looks fine. And it's legit. And according to the user, it's going to look legit too, which is one reason why phishing scams and stuff like that are such an issue. Because if you go onto a website that, as far as you're concerned, is a perfectly fine website, and the website's like, please download our whatever, and you're like, OK, cool, and it's actually some sort of nasty malware, as far as that user's concerned, it's actually just going to come from the site itself. So cross-site scripting is a form of injection attack. And has anyone seen this comic before? Assuming maybe some of you have. Has anyone not seen this comic before? OK, a couple of you, cool. So this is sort of the canonical example of injection attacks. This is about SQL injection. It's from XKCD. And it, in this comic, this mom, which is very low resolution at this size, apparently, named her kid Robert Drop Table Students. And when the teacher put her kid's name into the database, it dropped the entire students table. The mom's like, well, hope you learn to sanitize your database inputs then. So what this is doing is teaching us a lesson about what SQL injection is, how it happens, and how well, we're not getting into how it can be prevented yet. But so the way that this injection attack works, and I'm just going to point at this screen because pointing at my screen is weird, is that originally it just said, insert into student's values name. And all that name was just whatever the user happened to throw in there. If you're a well-intentioned developer who's like, everybody is as nice and well-intentioned as me, they're going to put their name in there. It's going to reflect. That's going to be fine. That's chill. If, however, you are an attacker, something you could do with that is make it so that it's, as that said, like breaking out of a data context and entering a code context. Like that, because of the way that it is closed there, makes it so that actually that's just executing code in and of itself. And because it's just throwing into the database whatever you put in it, then it is just putting in whatever. So the way that cross-site scripting works is that, so I'm going to actually go away from this for a minute and exit this, sorry everybody, and go to a browser and just show you what I'm talking about because it's easier to just show you. So this is an intentionally insecure website. And if I'm searching in here, I'm searching for the word, somebody give me a word. Donut. And OK, so in this URL here, the search query is donut, and that's being reflected here in the site. If I put, for example, B, donut, and I search for that, this shows up bold. I don't know how easily that is seen from that screen because I can't quite see it. But the reason why that's showing up bold is, yes, Jessica?
A little bigger, it's hard to see.
Absolutely, I'm sorry. Thank you for the heads up. So everybody can see it now? Good? OK, so the reason why it's showing up bold is because it's just taking whatever HTML input you're throwing in there and then just showing it as is, which if all of the person wants to do is make it bold is probably chill. But if it's an attacker and they're trying to do something else, they can do other things. So if, for example, they wanted to put script alert, oh no, hacksword, anyone have a guess as to what will happen? Yeah, you're going to get an alert window. It's just going to execute the JavaScript as is. Oh no, hacksword. So, and one might be like, well, OK, so what? So it has a pop-up window. Like pop-up windows are annoying. Nobody likes them. But like, what could this do? And the thing is that because you can actually just execute any arbitrary script whatsoever, what if that script, for example, had on key down every single thing being logged in and sent somewhere? Then it actually just becomes a keylogger, right? What if that script sends a post call or a redirect on an API call in a form that actually sends the password to their site and not to the site you're trying to send it to? As far as the user's concerned, I mean, it just shows up the way that it's supposed to. Like I said, as far as the site's concerned, it looks fine. It's part of the content itself. But it's not. It's from somebody else. It's from an attacker. And so OK, so that's, woo, OK. I've never given a tech talk. OK, so this is one form of cross-site scripting that's called reflected cross-site scripting. And the reason why it's called reflected is because it's just putting in there whatever you throw in it. It's just reflecting it back at you. There are three types of cross-site scripting. One is reflected XSS, which is this. One is stored XSS, which I'll talk about in a minute. And one is DOM-based XSS, which is different. And I'll explain them all. So reflected, as I said, is this one. It's just whatever you show to it, that will happen. It requires, a lot of the time, some user interaction, but not always. Because, for example, if you have image source equals X, on error equals alert, 1 or whatever, what do y'all think will happen? Any guesses? I might have screwed up this live coding, so we'll see how this goes. If, I'm not sure I need to. Let's see what happens. I might have screwed this up. We'll find out. Interestingly, this didn't fire off, but it was supposed to. And what that was supposed to show is that if there's something in there that errors out, you can have it fire on error, which can just load when the DOM loads or whatever. If there's something that on mouse over, the user doesn't have to click on it to get phishing scammed. They just have to mouse over it. If it is on focus, on blur, on anything, we all know our event handlers. This is JavaScript MN, right? It can just fire off on whatever event handler you put it. And that doesn't necessarily, unlike a lot of social engineering scams, require any user interaction at all. So, so that's reflected. But because it's mostly DOM-based, if you hit refresh, the likelihood is that reflected cross-site scripting is going to be gone once you hit refresh. It is validated on the server. It's not entirely client-based like DOM-based XSS is, and I'll get into that in a minute. But so stored XSS, which I have a title slide, which I guess I could go back to, but yeah, whatever, I'll do that. That's not the right one. Where's the right one? OK, we'll go back to this. Is also called persistent cross-site scripting because it does persist. Because the way that it works is, the sort of canonical example of this, and I don't have a cute website to show you for this one, is like, anybody remember like PHPBB forums? Or like InVision forums, or those like old school forums in the aughts that like we all posted on with our like really fancy forum signatures? Like everybody under 30 is like, I don't know what you're talking about. These existed, and were horrendously ugly a lot of the time. And one of the features of this was that a user could throw in whatever. They could throw in a file signature, they could throw in an image, they could throw in some comment that had whatever in it. And every user that went on it forevermore would then see whatever the user put there, which, again, if it's a nice user, and maybe that user wants to put their like ugly glittering butterfly or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with the ugly glittering butterfly, then everybody just sees that, and that's chill enough, I guess. But if it is a mean user, and they're putting it in with, for example, XSS code that goes into this forum database, everybody who ever goes to visit this website is going to get this code. And that's how XSS worms happen. Has anybody heard of the Sammy is a hero MySpace worm? One person in the back is nodding. What happened there?
I believe that, was this MySpace worm? Or
this was the MySpace worm, yeah.
So he put something that everybody who went to his, I think his MySpace page got signed up to be his friend no matter what, and then also they then had that on their pages, and then that just spread exponentially, and then everybody was his friend.
This person had over 1 million friend requests in less than 24 hours because everybody on MySpace who logged into MySpace or looked at it eventually got this worm. And so that is, stored XSS is a lot less common than reflected. Reflected XSS is pretty easy to accomplish. A lot of the time, nobody hangs out on much, I think, like PHPBB or InVision forums or anything like that anymore. And a lot of the time, people have become more careful with their file uploads. Not always, but a lot of the time. But it's nasty when it's there because it's coming from inside the house, right? It's originating from your database, and it's not going to leave when the user leaves, unlike the reflected kind. DOM-based XSS is different. Reflected and stored are both, they're both server-side. They're both server-based. DOM-based is entirely client-based, which makes it harder to detect, both from a code analysis standpoint if you're trying to secure it, and from the webmaster will not necessarily know that a bad call got made. They'll not be able to see because it's just all client stuff. But think about when we make our websites with whatever variety of JavaScript we all collectively use, how many things are set to change based on some kind of user interaction? Like, how many of us have made a site that reflected somebody's name back to them? How many of us have made a site that if somebody typed something in, people would see it? How many of us have made a site that had any event handlers in it at all? This is a room full of JavaScript heads. I bet the answer for that, I mean, I'll say I have, most of us probably have. And So it's also more difficult to prevent against, relatively speaking, because there are so many different things that are happening in any given DOM at any given moment in a lot of sites, especially with a lot of single page applications, a lot of the sort of more complicated stuff that we write. You know, what do we have in there? Not only do we have text, not only do we have, you know, we have images, we have things that are reacting to various kinds of user interaction, we have anything else that we have, and all of those things are, and this is the case with all websites really, all of those things are potentially vulnerable. So what do I have next? Oh, here's my what's the worst that can happen one that was supposed to be 4 slides ago. So let's talk about what's the worst that can happen. I think I read a lot of these out, but these are things that could be done in a browser with cross-site scripting attacks. And in some cases, there's actually, you can do more than you could with a browser, because who here has heard of Electron, or PhoneGap, or Ionic, or Cordova? You don't have to raise your hand for all of them, but any of them, who's heard of any of them? So what's Electron, right? Electron is a browser, right? It's running what looks like a native code, but it is actually just a browser with a sort of wrapper on it. And it's a browser that runs JavaScript like any other browser, but unlike other browsers, and I can say this now because Firefox Quantum, which just came out, has a sandbox in it, it doesn't have sandboxing. Does anybody not know what sandboxing is? It's okay to say yes. My kid doesn't. Does anybody else not know what sandboxing is? All right, back there. All right, so sandboxing is the idea that you're going to keep the browser separated from the rest of the operating system. Until very recently, Firefox didn't have it, the other two did. Electron doesn't have that, and Electron doesn't have other kinds of safety features that modern browsers do either. And a lot of the equivalents to Electron, Ionic, Cordova, PhoneGap, all of those, don't have that either. And so not only can you do whatever you can do in a browser, you can have access to the rest of the operating system. The MySpace worm is an old example, but does anybody remember the iMessage worm that came out a couple of years ago? Nobody. OK, well, I get to tell a story then. You do.
Oh, is that the one that broke your phone?
No. It was actually just a worm in the sort of same way that, that the MySpace one was. What it was also a feature of Electron apps, at least a lot of them, and was at the time that you could put in a URL and then have a alias to it, the way that you would in a keynote presentation, you know, where you can just say what it'll look like and then not necessarily what it actually says. So your URL looks like javascriptmn.com if I'm sending it to you. And what the actual URL is you know, javascriptmn.com /%27 whatever, you know, on click, you know, long thing of obfuscated malicious code, right? And what that did when the person clicked on it was they were like, oh, cool, check it out, you know, naked pictures of so-and-so, JavaScript MN, sweet, you know, was it would then download itself to that person's device and then send it to all of the people in that person's contact list, as well as all of the rooms that they were in. And because it was persistent XSS, for the chat rooms, for every person who entered the chat room, then who ended up with it, they ended up with all of it downloading itself to their devices and sending it to everybody in all of the rooms that they were in. And this was iMessage. This was the thing we all use on our iPhones to text all the time. And this was not that long ago. This was a couple of years ago. Because iMessage app at the time could hook through different kinds of texting apps that ran through Electron. And so they were able to do this because of that. They were able to access the file system. They were able to access various other things. There are other things like that. Who here uses Atom? I'm guessing somebody does. I'll raise my hand. I use it. Who here? Really, not that many people? Nobody's raising their hand.
Visual Studio Code. Yes, why would you ever use that?
OK, fine. I don't know anything about Visual Studio Code, so I'm not going to speak to its vulnerabilities. But for the people who use Atom, I'm not going to ask who hasn't patched it since the 12th of October. But on the off chance that any of you haven't patched it since the 12th of October, The reason why that security update went out on the 12th of October was because Adam had a really nasty remote code execution vulnerability using cross-site scripting. Because cross-site scripting can't only happen with HTML, right? What other things can you put like a code block or an HTML block in? Anybody? And just READMEs. READMEs are in Markdown. Good, I'm getting to that. CSS, SVG files are XML based and can call outward. Various other things. And not quite there yet. So Adam did this because it was discovered that using Markdown files like READMEs, you could make it so that it would execute arbitrary HTML calls in the context of packages in Atom itself. So if anybody's ever used Atom with an extension or like any kind of plugin or anything like that, there's that thing where you install it, you hit that button, and it shows you the preview from GitHub or whatever about of the README. And so then you could be like, oh, this one does autocomplete Python, this one does TypeScript, this one does whatever. What people discovered was that if they made malicious READMEs, then whenever people hit this description, they didn't actually have to click on anything. It would actually just immediately arbitrarily execute the code once they clicked on the package name itself. And because it was in Markdown and because Markdown is not secure at all, it executed on their machine and executed on their machine from other sites. So if I'm hosting evilscript.js on my site, www.attacker.com, then the second that you click on this thing, it's just putting in evilscript.js, and evilscript.js can do anything. Because what can you do with JavaScript, y'all? We're a JavaScript event. We can do anything with JavaScript, right? So okay, I'm trying to convince you that you should care about this. And because it matters. Because this stuff is bad stuff to happen. It's bad stuff to happen to your users. It's bad stuff to happen to you. And as devs, we should care about the safety and security of our users. We should be invested in doing our work ethically and protecting our users from harm. As nerds, we should care about improving our knowledge and practice of the things that we do, like getting better at our craft. If there's management in the room, hi, there's obviously a business case for protecting your company against security breaches. It looks bad, right? Like everybody saw Equifax, everybody was like, oh, this is terrible, right? And imagine being the guy who's trying to quit the red team at Equifax right now, or the blue team at Equifax, really. Like, you don't want to be that guy. Like, if the next time that you're looking for a job, if you are somebody who's been held responsible for some horrendously public security breach because of this stuff, it's going to look bad for you, and you're going to have to explain it, and it's not going to be fun. And so, if nothing else, for the most selfish reasons, if like the altruistic bleed heart stuff doesn't do it for you, like, we should care about this because you want to cover your own butt, So like, there's a sad kid in here. Okay, so like, all right, I guess I should care. But like, security is really freaking difficult, right? There's a lot going on there. I'm on a sprint deadline. I've already got like my PO breathing down my neck. Like, I have enough things to memorize with the new framework that's coming out every other week. Like, you really, like, are you serious? You think I should be like keeping in mind every single possible event handler and every single possible vulnerability that like could introduce XSS into my code? Like, really? Fair enough. It is hard. The landscape is always changing. It's always a cat and mouse game. Like, attackers are always going to try to figure out ways to get around whatever things you throw at them. And that is a lot to deal with, especially for like all of us as devs who have like hard-ass jobs and have a lot going on. The good news is that you don't have to do it all on your own. That there are actually tools and libraries and things like that that you can use, and that you don't actually have to reinvent the wheel and figure it all out yourself. So like, this is supposed to be a GIF. You got this. I'm going to let that play while I do my next couple of seconds. So like, I go to HackerCons a lot, and at a lot of HackerCons, there's something called a lockpicking village, where people get together and pick locks. It's called lock sports. People are really into it. I'm not going to say that my lockpicking skills are amazing, but it's fun to try. And some people's lockpicking skills really are amazing. Like, they're really freaking good at it. Like, I've met people, there's somebody named Deviant Alam who has videos on YouTube that are worth watching because he's phenomenal. And he can open anything. And there are people out there like that. And I know that there are people out there like that. And yet, when I leave the house, I lock the door. Why do I lock the door? Because if you leave your door wide open for anybody who happens to be wandering by to observe that it's open, then they will sometimes feel free to wander in, just kind of because they can. And locking the door is not going to stop the deviant Alams of the world. But locking the door might stop the people who happen to be wandering by who are like, open door, sounds good. And so, like, it is true that attackers are clever and that they're going to try to figure out a lot of ways to bypass the things that you throw at them. It is also true that there are a couple of pretty simple things that you can do to prevent a lot of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in your own code. So now we're going to go into that and talk about what you can do. All right, cool. So what can I do? What do I have next? So there are a few things that you can do. And I'm going to say, well, no, I'm going to say that in a minute. One thing that you can do is, OK, first, I am going to say that. One thing, you don't want to do any one thing. No single thing is going to completely prevent cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in your code. No single thing is going to stop attackers. And honestly, a lot of multiple things aren't necessarily going to stop all attackers, but using multiple things and using them right will prevent the vast, vast, vast majority of these kinds of attacks. So one thing that I think people sort of think of is like, OK, blacklisting. Like, what if I make it so these things that open and close HTML tags are blocked? If I have a regex in here, if I just say that nobody can put those kinds of special characters into here, will that stop that? What do people think? Nah, because there's a lot of other things you can do. I'm going to exit this real quick, and I'm going to go into Atom, which means it will be a shit show and it will be funny. OK, here's script alert script with your HTML tags. You could also do JavaScript alert. You could also do different things. And this is going to be different regardless of where you are, pretty much. Like in CSS, that's going to be like, what, \27 or something. I don't know this off the top, but maybe somebody here who's better at CSS than I am does. In a URL, maybe it's going to be like, ampersand LT semicolon. And another thing, it might be like %2. They're all going to be different in every single context that you run into. So that's one thing. And for another thing, there's a lot of ways to obfuscate this stuff, right? So like, if they, this thing, if you don't want that, you could do like the HTML encoding of a semicolon. If you don't want to do that, you could use Unicode encoding to make it look like something else. If you don't want to do that, like, well, OK, maybe I will block the word alert, or I'll block the word. So OK, cool. Then the attacker uses prompt or confirm, right? Like, OK, maybe I will block the word script. And then does your regex apply to capitalized letters as well as capitalized words? Does it apply to SCR Unicode? Does it apply to all these other things? Possibly not. It's a pretty difficult thing to keep up with. And if you were, and I have a spoiler up, and my apologies for that, to block all alphanumeric input, has anybody heard of JSFuck? Yes. This is JSFuck. JSFuck, and I'm going to show you the website for this because it's amazing, is you can write any JavaScript whatsoever, and I'm going to make this bigger, using only these 6 characters. It's basically the equivalent of writing, like, if you want to write the number 300, being like 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, which is not very efficient, but will eventually get you to the number 300. So alert 1 is, in JSFuck, 1,227 characters. Alert, oh no, hacksword is, anybody got a guess?
2 million?
A lot. In code, 29,256. And what happens if we run it? Even though it doesn't look like anything like English or really any kind of code at all. Oh no, hacksword, So there's a lot of ways that you can get around any kind of blacklist, even with somebody who's good at blacklisting, just because there's just so much stuff that you can do. And are you covering all of your bases? How is your CSS? Do you have untrusted data anywhere? Are you consuming data from elsewhere, anywhere at all? And for most of us, I think often the answer is yes, right? So, okay, I think I said this. People will figure out how to bypass it. There's a lot of different places that different kinds of escaping looks different. It's going to be a losing battle, probably, or it's at least going to be like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of keeping up. It's going to be pretty exhausting, and it might not actually work at the end of the day. So what else can we do then? So has anybody heard of defense in depth? Somebody? So defense in depth is the idea, it's a sort of like concept in information security where, has anybody played like Plants vs. Zombies? Okay, so everybody knows about like tower defense games, right? It's actually sort of the same idea, where like one thing is not actually going to stop all of the things that are coming for your tower. It might stop some of them, it won't stop all of them. But the way, I mean, much frankly, like in Plants vs. Zombies or whatever tower defense game is your game of choice, like if you have multiple layers of defenses, that's going to make it harder for any given attacker to go through. And it's having layers of security in different aspects that together is going to give you more of a chance of being able to keep your code and your users safer. I'm not also, for the record, very sure that this is a very secure lock, but Google image search. So some things that, I'm going to give you a list of stuff. That list is not exhaustive, and there's more of it. And if you're interested in this, there's so much stuff that you can find out about it. And I'm going to say that not everybody needs to do all of these things, but the first two that I mentioned, in and of themselves, are going to keep a lot of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities from happening. So one of them is input validation. Presumably, a lot of us work on apps that require some sort of input one way or the other, right? If it's user input, maybe they're putting in their name and address. Maybe they are putting in an integer. Maybe they are putting in something that is supposed to be a 2-letter state. Maybe they're supposed to be putting in whatever they're supposed to be putting in. You know as the developer what that is supposed to look like. So if you know that it's supposed to be an integer, you can type it as an integer and make sure that whatever's coming in is going to go according to that type. If you know that it's supposed to be a text string that's under a certain amount of letters, limiting it to that certain amount of letters, like validating the things that you get according to what you know is supposed to be in there, can actually go a long way in terms of making sure that it's what you want it to be. And also with input validation, it's not just user input, right? Because like untrusted data, and I'm going to get back to untrusted data as a concept in a minute, isn't just from users. Untrusted data can come from anywhere. And if you don't think it's untrusted data and it's not coming from you, you should. Because anything that you are getting from a database, anything that you are getting from an API, anything that you're getting from like some file hosted somewhere, anything that you're getting from anywhere, any kind of data that you're consuming, whether it is directly put in by your user on the client side or not, is coming from somewhere that isn't you. It is coming from some user. And if you're lucky, it's not coming from an attacker, but that's not a guarantee. So treating all untrusted data as untrusted data and not as data that you think you should trust, and validating all of the data that you get, no matter where it's coming from, will actually go a really long way toward helping keep you safer from the stuff that's coming in. And in terms of the stuff that's going back out, output encoding. So if I have, the thing that I just showed you where I was like, oh no, hacksword or whatever, and I, put it in and it executes as arbitrary JavaScript code as it did, that is, that's because it isn't actually paying attention to what it's getting, and it's not paying attention to what it's putting back out either. And if you have that so that it's not only validating that input, it's encoding the output so that it only shows up as a string, then all that looks like when you put it in is just alert hacksorted or whatever, it doesn't look like the actual code because you are dealing with the data that you're getting and not just letting it go straight through the dump pipe. Because the dump pipe, as I said, doesn't actually know any better. Like, you are the smart endpoint in this case. Has anybody heard of a content security policy? A couple of y'all. So a CSP is an extremely effective way of stopping a lot of cross-site scripting attacks. And what a CSP is it is stating where things are allowed to run from. So it could be like, some people will say only content, like scripts can run from self, right? So like, if it is coming from my site itself, it will run. If it's coming from absolutely anywhere else, it won't run. And for some people, that is desirable. That's probably the safest thing to do. But what if you have your JavaScript frameworks on a CDN? Or if you have like a font from somewhere or anything that you might host from elsewhere, that might not be a desirable outcome for you. So you can make different kinds of content security policies. And there's a lot of different, I didn't list the directives because it was just going to be really tiny font and it was going to be annoying to look at, but you can look this up. And they have things like script source, font source, worker source, like different things that you can declare where your data is and is not supposed to go and where it is or is not supposed to be coming from. And if you know, for example, that you are hosting Angular from some CDN somewhere, then you can take the MD5 hash of that and say, OK, scripts can only run from self or from this hash. And some people might respond by being like, that sounds annoying. You mean that every time it updates, I have to update this hash? And the answer is yes. But it will help keep you safer. And there are always trade-offs between security and convenience, which is one reason why security is really hard. And there are other things you can do, too. Does anybody know how to pronounce the word N-O-N-S or C-E, out of curiosity? No. Is it a nonce? OK, thank you, because I was like, I'm going to screw this up. So you can also make it so that it incorporates nonces, so that you don't necessarily have to change the hash every time it updates. And that is more complicated than I think it makes sense for me to get into here. But it's super interesting. And if people are curious, the link to it isn't on one of these slides, but I can send it to the JSMN Slack about like more elaborately how to do that. So you can implement a CSP that will help dictate where your script should and should not be running from. And if your CSP is looking right, then like it doesn't matter what kind of SSS things I do because it's just not going to work, right? That said, there are CSP bypasses for particularly gifted attackers, but that doesn't mean that most attackers will not be foiled by this. There are also tools that you can use for input validation, for output encoding, for static code analysis. XSS vulnerabilities are really easily detected, and that is one good thing about them. And so these are three you can use. DOM Purify is, I think, fairly self-explanatorily for DOM-based XSS specifically. JS XSS is an NPM package. It's server-side. Secure Filters is made by Salesforce, and that one is for validating input. There are a lot of these like that. These are three I wanted to shout out because they looked particularly great. But if you do an NPM search for XSS, you'll find a shit ton of them, if you'll excuse my language. And in general, don't trust data coming from elsewhere. And like that in and of itself is going to do a lot. Just if you treat all outside data as untrusted data and you run it through the appropriate validation, through the appropriate encoding, and then like that's going to do a lot for you. And if you walk away with one thing, I would like for it to be that, is like all data coming from elsewhere, no matter what it is or where it comes from, is untrusted data. Don't trust it. Work with that data to sanitize it appropriately, and you can do a lot to protect yourself that way. For real. Here are some resources. Some of them are more geared toward the dark arts. Some of them are more geared toward defense against them. You can decide according to your personal proclivities which one sounds more interesting to you. And there's a lot of really good information out there. So I have a thank you slide, but I'll actually just leave that open for everyone to take pictures of or whatever. And I want to thank everybody for coming and listening to this. And yeah, if people have any questions, I would love to answer them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you say like capture the flag type competitions. Have you taken a look at the WASP Juice Shop one?
I haven't.
So pull it up and look at it. I think it's of interest to people here because it's a intentionally insecure application. It's written entirely in JavaScript.
How do you spell it?
Juice Shop.
Juice Shop.
It's an
Okay.
OWASP,
Cool. I've seen various other OWASP things, but not that one.
This
So.
one looks like trust no one. I am trustworthy.
I mean, all right, if we're all downloading malware, then we're all in it together, right?
So this, like I said, this was interesting because it's written all in Node.js, Express, Angular. You can see right there in the description field. So
Cool.
For the audience here that's a lot of JavaScript based, this is a fun one, and it has both a learning mode and a capture the flag mode
Nice.
for competition. So
That's
I
awesome.
haven't had a chance to play with it yet, but I've
That's great.
told somebody to.
Google also has a pretty solid XSS game that's like xssgame.appspot.com. There's also this insecurelabs.org website, which specifically exists for XSS vulnerabilities for you to find. I didn't go into all of them because I just didn't, but that is a fun one to play with if you're into that. Yeah, thank you for that link. I want to go play with it too.
We got a follow-up on the labs, the insecure labs one, where it's using the mirroring and the reflective vulnerability. So, everything you showed, you had to type in that malicious script to execute it, which obviously wouldn't be very practical if you put a keylogger on yourself.
In this context, when I'm putting that in, I'm the attacker, right? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could give me an example of how an attacker would put that on your client.
Absolutely.
Zoom up to the URL bar. You see up there?
Query
Look up at the. Oh, that doesn't do.
But
Up here.
that would have to come from someone else.
Well, so here's one way potentially that could happen.
Oh, yes, I see what you're saying. I get it. That you clicked from somewhere else. I gotcha.
So there's.
I can't type apparently.
That's why I never live type.
It's the worst. Yeah, I swore I wouldn't do it, and then I ended up doing it anyway. What happens if we click here?
I get you. Yep.
So it's, there are actually things that you can do that are called self-XSS. It's a little bit obscure for my purposes today, but if you look up self-XSS, there's actually crazy shit you can do with it if you hook it into Metasploit and do various other things. There are things that you can do as a single attacker, but generally speaking, I think a lot of reflective things are going to be things that are going to be encouraging user interaction of some kind or another.
I've heard of stuff like that where, say that search had to go access a database or something like that, and then you try and put something in the database that shoots you back more information out of the database or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do. You could, for example, do alert document.cookie. And if there is a cookie set there, then I don't actually know if this will work or not on here because I don't know if it sets you a cookie. Apparently not. But if it did, and the cookie was...
You put in quotes, so.
Did I? Oh, good Lord.
So
Okay.
whoever said document.
This is why I said I wasn't going to live type, y'all. Click me. Well, apparently this one doesn't set me a cookie, but if it did set me a cookie, then I would have that information and I could use it to hijack a session. And if I had your cookie, it doesn't actually matter how secure of a password that you use because I just have your creds. Like, as far as it's concerned, I'm you. And so I can go right into the HR portal, I can go do whatever I want, and as far as the browser's concerned, it's a dumb pipe, it's chill. And I'm you, So that is an issue. Like, session hijacking can actually give you control over a lot of other systems, especially if you get into somebody's email and then you start retrieving passwords and all kinds of other things, if that makes any sense.
Are there any testing tools you recommend
Yeah, there are a lot of them. I may or may not be slightly blanking. There are really good static code analysis tools out there. There are tools that you can use to there's a Firefox extension that I knew of that I don't know is out for Quantum, and so I'm not going to name it. But I think if you looked up like XSS testing tools or XSS fuzzing, you could probably find a lot. And if anybody in the room does know about that, and I'm looking at you guys in the corner who clearly know things, please holler them out because I don't, because I'm blanking on them right now. But definitely look them up if you're interested. Does anybody else have any questions or anything? Okay. I'm really glad y'all came, and hopefully you learned a little bit that you can take home and help secure your code with. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ian. So awesome to have such a comprehensive security-focused talk at this event. Yeah, that was amazing. It's totally a treat. Sorry, this is what I get for setting up and talking. It's totally a treat to have such a comprehensive security-focused talk at this event. If you are interested in giving a talk like that, that would be amazing. Actually, I owe Ian a high five for doing that. But if you want to give a talk about anything, again, I'll just reiterate, let one of us know. And once my slide comes up here, main presentation, that is what you just saw. This is how you get on the Wi-Fi. I just want to give a shout out, in addition to our presenters, Zach and Ian today, and of course we already gave the shout out to our sponsors, a shout out to my fellow organizers. You met Anna earlier. Anna, thank you. Yes. Robert Toom in the back. Raymond Luker off to the side. Nick DeLuca, who I'm scanning for, and he's right over there. And I'm Brandon Johnson, the rambly one. We're super excited for the next event, which is going to take place in December, which is how the monthly thing works. We'll announce the details of where that's going to be and what that's going to look like momentarily.
It will not be here.
It will not be
that's
here.
The most important thing. Do not show up here at the next meetup.
We will update the location info on the website and on meetup.com so that you'll know where it will be, but this is not that place.
Is that a permanent switch or?
No, just
temporary.
they shut down for the holiday. Yep. So,
yep.
And I'm sure most of you shut down for the holiday as well.
Yep.
So.
We're going to plan something a little bit different. We're in the process of finalizing what that's going to look like, but we think you're all really going to enjoy it. So if you're around in December, we'll check it out. Let's figure out what day it is. Why not? We got the thing here for it. Except I'm not on the internet. One more try. Yeah, still not on the internet. Look at that. Got all of those captive portals, right? Okay, let's see here. Where did it go? Oh.
Talk about the shit you can do.
27.
27th, yes, 27th. Randomly too. Let's stick with that. So if you're around the 27th, we will have a meetup for you, and it will be awesome.
Oh, probably.
We're very organized.
Extremely organized.
It's amazing this stuff happens at all.
So suffice it to say, there will be a meetup, and it will be cool. We hope, but only if you're there. So we'll hope to see you when that happens. But the other thing I was going to say was I would appreciate each and every one of you showing up. It's so great to see everybody here. If you want to give us feedback or whatever, tell me to be less rambly. You can do so on the Slack, which we already told you how to join. Twitter, or email us, or just like flag me down as I'm leaving, flag any of us down as we're leaving. But my feedback against me will not be as helpful when directed to those folks. There was one last thing I was going to say, and I don't recall what it was, but we'll leave it at that. Have a
But
great.
if you have a thank you card, I sent them out around so you all could sign them.
That was it.
If you have it on your lap or under your chair, if you could be so kind as to drop it off at the table on your way out and not leave it there.
And then Ian has a thing.
Also, I neglected to mention this, but if anybody ever wants to nerd about security things about like anywhere, I'm always happy to do it.
If you're running High Sierra on your Mac,
Yeah, if you don't have a root password set, yesterday might have been a good time.
Let's do a live demo on there.
Yeah.
They did release a patch today, and it's not even restart required. So if you run High Sierra, you can just go into software update, get the patch. No, you don't even have to restart. You can move on to your latest job. If you have not done that, oh my God, please do that.
don't forget to stop by our camera and say thank you to our sponsors. So if you have a second, stand in front of that camera and say thank you.
We're going to try and make it happen. We are.
It's going to happen.
You're gonna make such happen.
Oh,
Be
yeah.
thankful.
All right. That's our show. Thanks, everybody.